School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution, Middle East superpowers, a new world order. Before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, very important information we got to get into tonight. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, new Middle East alliance, nuclear. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into all of that.
Our dear colleagues at the Ministry of Defense have demonstrated a very important job here. When one enters this place, one sees nothing but hard work and effort, and alongside that, a passion for progress. With the dedication of the ministry staff and senior managers, they have been able to produce equipment that is much better than in the past, which possesses both superior capabilities and high quality. Furthermore, they have been able to bring it to the production stage in much greater quantities than before.
The revolution is made through human beings, but individuals must forge their revolutionary spirit day by day.
Every revolution begins with a question.
Third, 2026, and our dear friend Larry Johnson is here with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Hey, man. Years blitzing by. We're almost the end of August. Good Lord.
Exactly. The time flies.
I think it was probably June 1st.
Yeah. Let's put it. I wanted to say something, but I said, it's personal. Let's talk about it later. Larry.
All right. Calm down.
let me start with what we've learned from the head of the Iranian parliament's news agency. He said he told the Al-Mayadin, you know that outlet, news outlet. You
Yeah.
go on that outlet, and he said to that news outlet that Iran has received an invitation to join Mecca Defense Pact.
Yeah.
This is bombastic, and this is the only source, by the way.
Yeah. Why bombastic?
Because we were speculating all about if Iran going to be part of this. If you remember when I first mentioned that, you said, yeah, it would be meaningful if Iran joins that. And
yeah. So if they got an invitation, that's going to be. It's not just Iran. I think they also invited Syria, right?
Syria said they're considering to be, and Bangladesh, by the way. Bangladesh says they're considering. Bangladesh is far away from the West Asia. It's,
Yeah, Bangladesh they don't bring a lot to the table. Nice people, very lovely people. But they don't have a lot of, they don't have a lot of clout. My friend, former member of Congress, Cynthia McKinney, she lives in Bangladesh. She's a sweetheart, tough lady.
What do they want? Let's assume Bangladesh. They're saying that they're considering to join it. What is in it for Bangladesh? Bangladesh is far away. It's Pakistan, India. Then you have Bangladesh going to the
creating a really a Muslim alliance. So that this is Muslims coming together to pledge mutual security. That, because Bangladesh does provide troops for international peacekeeping operations. So, I'm not. It shouldn't surprise anybody that they might want to join this. It doesn't bring a lot to the table. It's not like there's some formidable military power. But it's essentially just what's one more warm body in the room.
And this news that I just about the head of Iran's parliament's news agency that told that Iran received an invitation. The other point was during yesterday, the head of National Security Council in Iran said that they were asked to confirm the agreement, the pact, and they said that this is not
okay.
To accept it, to confirm it. Iran confirming the pact between these three countries.
What does that mean? Confirming?
I didn't get it, to be honest, because he said
that makes two of us.
Yeah, because when you say confirm, it means that you want to be part of it. Because in Persian, when you say you confirm it, it means that he said it in Persian. But the implication of that would be you want to be part of it. But Iran said that we don't know exactly what are the specifications of that deal. We have to start it from scratch. We have to know what is in it, what is every detail in that agreement before. Yeah. This was one of the points that he mentioned. And the other point that he's mentioned is so important as well, is that without Iran and Egypt, because he considers all these countries, Muslim countries, without Iran and Egypt, it doesn't mean anything after all.
Now, who said that?
The head, Mohsen Rezai.
Oh, so Rezai said without Iran and Egypt, it's a meaningless alliance. Yeah, I would sort of agree with that. So, Egypt so far, I guess Egypt was invited, and they just chose initially not to accept the invitation. probably because they'd rather get the monthly paycheck from Washington.
Do you think in the coming week we're going to learn more about what the United States would do? But today we had the Iranian foreign minister saying this is the same old policy. Nothing new is the United States going to bring to the table. And the Channel 12 of Israel reported that Saudi Arabia is so much frustrated, is so much desperate, and they're talking with the United States. It was reported on Channel 12 of Israel, and they're basically mentioning the economy of Saudi Arabia and how much pressure the whole case is bringing to their economy, and getting along with the United States would be additional pressure on them.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're talking about D-Day, Larry, what is the main, elements that could be different from before?
I don't know. I think it's rhetorical flourishes by Bessent. You've already got the UAE saying they're cutting off trade relations with Iran, and that's fairly significant. But as you and I have talked before, Iran started preparing itself for this several months ago. And it's not just some new development. I think actually in the long run that's gonna hurt UAE more than it's gonna hurt Iran. I don't see it's not like they can go out and grab a big pot of Iranian money tomorrow and run off with it. But then you couple that with the fact that you've had China speaking, hey, leave hands off Iran, essentially. That's an important message. So I think people are expecting some grand masterstroke of genius tomorrow. I think you're going to be disappointed.
Mohsen Rezai tweeted today as if the economic war continues, not a single drop of oil will be exported, neither through the Strait of Hormuz nor from anywhere in the Persian Gulf. Iran will regard any country's participation in or support for America's economic war against Iranian people as an act of war. I assume that there are talks behind the scene between Iran and GCC countries in that regard, and they're mentioning what would be, the details of the attacks if they attack, and what are the targets for Iranians. And is that gonna be considered by Washington, in your opinion?
Oh, I think they're inclined more to discount it. That they don't want to believe it. They've got themselves convinced. So surely Iran can't keep this up much longer. They're going to collapse. And then Iran keeps going and going and going and doesn't collapse. So, that's a problem the United States have of having to reset its expectations. It's been so convinced that it's got Iran on the ropes, and it hasn't. And I think China reaffirmed the futility of that by saying, "Look, we're not giving up on Iran," and warning the United States, leave Iran alone.
I assume Donald Trump would talk about it soon with China and trying to press and
don't hold your breath. Yeah, I don't think all he will do is issue more threats, like he declared again. Strait of Hormuz is America's U.S. territory. Yeah, sure. He thinks he's some big dog like my Rottweiler. When they go out they mark territory, hike their hind leg, take a piss on a plant, say, this is mine. Think of Donald Trump as a little chihuahua, waddling along, can barely get its leg up, and more often than not pisses on himself instead of on the territory that he's marking. That's what the United States has become, sort of a joke, a sad joke, a malevolent joke, but a joke nonetheless. Because we control the Strait of Hormuz. No, you don't. Cowboy, if you did, go in there and plant your flag, show us. Yeah, they won't. They're very, very reluctant to put any U.S. ships there into the strait.
Do they get, Larry, the depth of the destruction they're doing to the foreign policy of the United States, or they don't care about it?
They're not thinking about it. Think of it like looking through different colored lenses. So, if you look through the blue lens, you see the world in blue. You look through the red lens, you see the world in red. And he's chosen to look through the world in a way that bears no resemblance to reality. In fact, it's based on a lack of reality.
His main objective was MAGA, make America great again. I think with the tariffs and with the tariff war in China, he forced China to move itself a little bit, to come out a little bit, to flex its muscles. And he did the same with the case of Iran. Iran didn't want the war at all. And he forced Iran to fight back.
Well,
and the question is, he's making Iran great again, he's making China great again, he's making Russia great again, or he's making the United States great again?
Well, he's making the United States indebted and weaker. And that's readily apparent on a variety of fronts. So the debt going up over $40 trillion. Are you kidding me? That happened last Wednesday. And let's see here. Look up the the U.S. debt clock. So, he's up. They're adding roughly. Let's see. We had Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday. So they're it looks like they're adding about $16 billion a day to the debt, and to get to 41 trillion. It looks like that will take, hang on here, let me look. By 16, 62 months. So literally we could be back in another, crossing another milestone, 41 trillion in debt by the end of September.
Oh. Let me play a clip of Donald Trump talking about the debt, Larry.
Debt, because remember, we have $34 trillion in debt. We've got to pay it off. We're going to pay down debt. We're going to reduce the hell out of the debt. We're going to pay off debt. The $35 trillion in debt, we're going to pay it off. We're going to get it done fast, too. Pay off debt. Pay off a lot of the debt, and we have plenty of it. We'll start paying off debt. We want growth in our country. That's what's going to pay off our debt. We're going to give back a lot of money into the Treasury and pay down debt. We're going to work on national debt very strongly, by the way. We are going to grow to start paying down our debt. We have $35 trillion in national debt. We're all set to do it. We're going to make a lot of money. We're going to pay down debt. We're going to make so much money. We're going to pay off debt. We're going to pay off our debt. We're going to do things that you wouldn't believe. We're going to make our country so competitive.
Now, did you put that together, or did somebody on TikTok do that?
Someone else put it together. I received it.
Yeah, the only thing growing right now is Trump's nose, like Pinocchio. The more lies he tells, the bigger his nose grows. You know, add the debt. Let's not forget the debt is growing.
He's not doing anything to improve that, Larry. None of the objectives he had before, he's talking about none of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems that with the case of Venezuela, he sees the whole, he accomplished everything. And so this would be his legacy. So he's feeling so good about it. And when it comes, go ahead, Larry.
No. I was just going to say, he just, he gets a story in his mind, likes the story, keeps telling it over and over. And the more he tells it, the more he's convinced it's true. So, but just strong belief does not make it true.
No one is. There were people arguing that Scott Bessent is different. The guy knows his job, and that's going to be the difference of the Trump administration. But you don't see that much of Scott Bessent. Is he melting away? Is somehow fading away because of Donald Trump, or he didn't have it even before coming to his position?
Okay, what do you mean we don't see a lot of Mark Bessent?
Because what is the positive outcome of Scott Bessent if he's that much,
Well, I mean, we see a lot, we hear a lot, but he's not accomplishing a lot. Let's make that distinction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But what matters most is accomplishing something, not talking about it.
Well, no, he's accomplishing nothing. I describe it. He's in a lifeboat, off the Titanic. The Titanic is sinking, and the lifeboat's got leaks, and he keeps trying to bail water out of the lifeboat to keep it from sinking. But the problem is he can't fix those holes. And the hole is the U.S. debt, the growing lack of confidence among other nations into the U.S. dollar. And so as a result of that, the pressure on the dollar it's putting him in a more frantic effort to try to prop the dollar up and to try. But, if you drop the yields on bonds, basically you're going to get paid less money for holding those bonds. That's not very attractive. People say, "Oh, why do I do that?" They're losing money. They want to make money. So this is a case where the real market economy has now basically overtaken Bessent's ability to manipulate the market to make it look like it is better than what it is.
Is it because of Donald Trump, Larry? It's the administration is not functioning. The foreign policy is not functioning. The Treasury is somehow in some sort of, it's so much confused basically about the two wars in Ukraine and the West Asia. With the case of Canada, the same. And even the Canadians are so much angry about what's going on. I don't know if you saw the interview of the Premier of Canada's Ontario, Doug Ford, about the negotiations they have with the United States about the tariffs.
I haven't seen that. What did he say?
Here is what he said. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm going to give the Prime Minister credit one more time. It's very complicated, folks. And, President Trump, he can't be trusted. Simple as that. He changes the deal. He keeps moving the goalpost. Let me tell you about President Trump. President Trump is the type of person that would steal your lunch money the first day. He'd steal the toque off your head the second day, and the third day he'd steal your running shoes. He is not to be trusted whatsoever. We need to stay united.
Yeah, another Trump fan, huh? I mean, that Trump charm offensive is working miracles, isn't it? Oh my God. Let's see. We're coming up with a list of countries that are lining up with the United States to support the United States by buying its bonds and buying its bullshit. That's one list. The list of countries that are increasingly alienated and frustrated and mad at Trump. Well, we put Canada there. I bet Greenland could go on the list. Denmark? Yeah, sure. What about Oman? Oh, yeah, let's not forget Oman. South Korea. So, if this is a charm offensive, somebody needs to tackle the man and stop him before he does any more charm, because he's setting the U.S. relations with other countries on fire.
But this incompetence, it comes from Donald Trump himself, or do you see this incompetence in the people who are running that sector, in this term, the Treasury, the State Department?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're pitching it as either or. I think it's both. Yeah, yes, across the board. Which is not a sunny, optimistic outlook. I'll grant you that.
This is not a good sign for anybody who's talking, negotiating, or trying to have economic ties with the United States.
You think? Yeah. This is like dating Lorena Bobbitt. Do you remember who Lorena Bobbitt was?
No.
So she was she cut off her husband's penis back in the 1980s. And then she went on and became, she was hooked up with Sam Kinison and stuff. I think Sam Kinison, or maybe not. Maybe it was someone else. But anyway, she's a bit out there, and not the kind of person you want to date, and certainly not want to sleep with. And that's what, the United States, if you think of the United States as, like on Tinder, hey, I'm looking to date and, find some romance. Boy, if the United States comes up on your list, they're not your choice. They say, oh, stay away from them. You get all, because you're going to, South Korea say, they'll write their comments, stay away, bad. Qatar, Oman, they're going to have some choice words to say. Canada, Denmark, Panama, even Brazil. To me, the entire concept behind foreign policy was, how can we figure out the one to get nations to like us, to support us, and to stand with us on difficult issues. Now we're so busy being the abusive friend to all these different countries that it makes it a little difficult to find a friendly place to stop.
And the policy of submit, they have to submit. Nothing else would work.
Well, I mean, talking about the United States and cement, the United States is basically trying to create cement shoes for everybody, put them in the shoes and then dump them in the ocean. I mean, again, look with Oman, threatening to bomb Oman, and not just Oman. Remember, Trump yesterday threatened, it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, threatened to bomb countries that wouldn't buy our bonds. Buy our bonds or else. Ooh, there's a sales pitch.
It's unbelievable, the transformation of Donald Trump in what he is today. I don't know what has caused that sort of drastic change in his view.
Well,
He's not.
he's very frustrated,
Hmm.
and now that frustration, he's angry. He thought he was in control. He thought he could dictate to these other people, other countries, what they must do. And instead, they're basically saying, "Nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to go do our own thing." So they built up this expectation. Monday, man, Monday better be an explosive economic day, a savagery on Iran. But then it's a form of attack. It's not using bombs where immediately people are killed, but these kinds of sanctions have the potential to cause damage inside Iran that leads to the loss of life of people. But I think Iran's going to be punching back.
Well, I think he has to have some sort of cooperation, or some of these countries around Iran may consider, helping Donald Trump. But when it comes to the participation or the help Donald Trump can get from the neighboring countries of Iran, which one? Here is the map, Larry. Which one, in your opinion, is the most, vulnerable, and they would help the United States the most if
UAE.
tomorrow and in the coming days and months?
UAE. They're the
UAE.
they're the most vulnerable. Basically, if they participate fully in this economic attack on Iran made it clear if countries, if they participate in this attack, they're going to treat it just like the country was used as a staging base to launch military strikes in Iran. So and UAE has been hit pretty hard. It didn't get a lot of news coverage, but I've heard from a friend in the region who's a consultant and able to move among a variety of the countries and knows full well how much damage has been done. And UAE suffered a lot of damage.
Here is the other countries that may help him. We know tomorrow, Larry, Asim Munir is going to go to Iran to talk with Iran. And it seems that today, still behind the scene, the Trump administration is trying to do something. Because if Asim Munir tomorrow goes to Iran, it means that Donald Trump is asking him to go. It's not going to.
But maybe not. He may be going because he's been in conversations with the Chinese as well.
Mm.
Now, I have not. Pepe and Zulfikar did a show a couple of 2.5 hours ago. I was teaching, so I was unable to participate. But they had some new information. I've not seen the information yet, but the Z-Man described it as a bombshell. Now, sometimes he gets a little over enthusiastic, but actually, I think some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes here is signaling that Pakistan is being forced by the United States to potentially make a change and to either come side with the United States or side with China. And I think when everything's said and done, Pakistan's going to side with China, because what the United States is going to do, they're going to try to hold Pakistan hostage with an IMF loan. And I think Pakistan is going to find China is much more receptive.
Do you think China would be able to help them with?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I absolutely do believe that China will help them. If nothing else, make money available through that new economic development bank that BRICS is setting up.
Yeah. So if China, let's assume China is somehow facilitating or asking them to do something, And we know that Pakistan would be part of the game if the United States decides to put pressure on the neighboring countries of Iran. Here is, you see Pakistan and the importance of Pakistan here.
Yeah.
Pakistan is here. And we know go ahead.
Well, I was just say, what I was going to ask you, what is the one reason that Pakistan is unlikely to break relations with Iran or engage in the conduct to harm Iran economically?
Yeah.
Do you know? I'm not trying to play stump the chump. I'm just saying.
I know.
Have you looked at the data?
My understanding is because the two sides, because of this region, the two sides are so much connected. You know, the borders are so important for the two countries. The trade goes in and out. It's not about one.
Okay, the trade goes. What are they trading? What is Iran supplying to Pakistan?
Iran supplied to Pakistan? I don't have any information.
Oil and gas.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is to Pakistan?
Yeah, oil and gas. Yeah, that's I was thinking of
that's like having blood flow cut off to your heart.
Because because I know that Iran has been importing rice from Pakistan, because the rice of Pakistan is popular. The rice of India and Pakistan goes to Iran.
Yeah.
And I thought that they're going to send something, they're receiving something from China or from Russia or from somewhere else and then sending to Pakistan. I was thinking in that term. But you mentioned, you're right, because of the oil. Oil is the most important thing that is happening between the two countries. Yeah.
It is. And oil, baby. Oil and gas.
The easiest way to get energy for Pakistan is Iran.
No, I think it's the primary supplier of oil and gas to Pakistan.
Yeah.
So if it shows up and is threatening them economically, Pakistan's going to say, well, you know what? We're gonna lose our supply of oil and gas. Get out of here. You're crazy. We're not going to do that. They're not Germany. They'll say, oh, well, we'll blow up our pipeline with Russia so we can buy more expensive oil and gas and bankrupt our country. Yeah. Pakistan, they're not stupid.
Yeah. Today I was talking with Stanislav Kropivnik, and the case of Germany is just amazing. I think no country on this planet would do what Germany has done, to sacrifice everything for the sake of this and stupid war, this nonsensical war in Ukraine.
Well, let's give Germany some credit. They're consistent. I mean, hell, what did they do in World War II?
Yeah.
Blew themselves up. So, it's not as devastating yet as World War II was to them. But they certainly embarked on a crazy strategy back then, thinking, oh yeah, we'll invade the Soviet Union, which was really, let's invade Ukraine and Russia, see how that works out. Yeah, that in retrospect, that turned out to be a pretty bad idea. And Germany suffered the consequences. Now, they are energy short. Their industries are closing up. They've got their debt is growing. So, all the indicators are heading in the wrong direction.
Is it possible, Larry, for Germany to replace China by any means or any way that would be as beneficial as Russian energy, that was of the basics of their economy to be that stable, that growing for many years? Is it possible for them to get it from somewhere else other than Russia?
No. That's the point. It's not like there's a buyer's market out there that, think of it like in real estate. 3 years ago here in Florida, boy, everybody's competing to buy houses. It was a seller's market because there wasn't a lot of inventory, and so people were able to get extraordinarily high prices. Now there are a lot of houses on the market, and people that want to buy, they're not having to pay as much as they used to. So, yeah, and with German debt, I was just double checking. So German debt to GDP, it used to be it was pretty low, like around 50%. 2024, it crept up to 62%. Last year, it was up to 64%. And right now, it's headed towards 67%. They're going the wrong direction. They're like that guy that lost his job, had some savings, borrowing on the savings, try to keep their lifestyle up. But at some point, they run out of money.
Yeah. I think the second place in the debt to GDP is Japan. Japan is not in a good shape.
You are wrong, my friend. They're number one.
Wow.
Their debt to GDP ratio is something like 245 to 1. I mean, it's enormous. The United States, though, is creeping up there. It's at least 125%. So now officially, the U.S. debt is greater than the U.S. GDP. I think that's the first time in history.
So the war in the West Asia is against Japan more than anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense how the United States needed to help Japan, to bail out the way they did with Argentina. But Japan is here, Larry. Ukraine. It seems that Ukraine is talking with Donald Trump, Elon Musk to allow Starlink to be used over Russian territory for Ukrainian military operation. And Zelensky said today that Ukraine's defense ministry initially indicated that SpaceX was prepared to permit the use of the Starlink, only if a political approval and it was needed. It means that Elon Musk agreed with them, but Elon Musk needs the permission of Donald Trump. Oh, isn't that so strange? Because
what it potentially would lead to is, possibility that Russia would start striking Starlink satellites and destroying them. Russia does have that capability. They haven't used it up to this point, but I think Russia's attitude now is, okay, you're going to use that against us, we're going to take them out.
There were talks today. There were some reports that the United States, or maybe the government in Azerbaijan, is bringing the two sides, means Turkey and Israel, together to talk to reduce the tensions.
Well, yeah, that'll happen. Aliyev is such a trustworthy figure. I mean, good Lord. He's basically a thug, and he's skating on really thin ice. Azerbaijan is very, very vulnerable. So, they get crosswise with Russia, and I think the gulf between Israel and Turkey is so great now. I don't think it can be bridged.
It means that one of them should back down or must back down. And the question is, which one would do that?
You think Turkey's going to back down? I don't.
No.
I think Turkey's going to become more aggressive. They're not going to be dictated to by Israel. But again, it's Turkey's own fault, because they continue to supply Azerbaijani oil to Israel. Now, that's really why Aliyev's trying to get things calmed down, because he recognizes if the money from Israel goes away, because it's backed up by the United States, he's gonna lose some major coin.
To understand how deep Turkey is involved in Syria, we have to understand that the government in Turkey was supporting these people in Idlib for many, many years. And after all, they somehow, I don't know if we can say that they deceived Iran and Russia somehow, or somehow after all, because there was an agreement between Turkey, Russia, and Iran, about Syria, which after all, they somehow deceived them.
Yeah, they're not to be trusted.
Yeah, if Turkey goes against Russia and Iran, it means that Israel is nothing for them to go.
Yeah. No, I don't think they're ultimately going to do that. Politically, it'd be too difficult at home for Erdogan. Now, I wrote a piece last night at Sonar 21, which I think is quite important, showing how the United States policy, in the early. Go back to 93, starting with the first attack on the World Trade Center. And then the attempted Bojinka plot by Al Qaeda to blow up jumbo jets flying over the Pacific. Then the attacks on the U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. Then the attack on the USS Cole. All of this was Al Qaeda. And then 9/11. And so the United States was pushing this meme that, oh man, we're fighting Islamic terrorism, all the while accusing Iran of being the number one sponsor of terrorism, where these terrorist acts are being carried out by Sunni groups, been funded by out of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. And so then the United States, starting, you go back to the war in Afghanistan in the 1980s, where the United States, with Gulf Arabs, Sunnis, were funding Islamic extremists in Afghanistan. Well, what did the United States do? So, on the one hand, it kept saying, "No, we're fighting this Islamic terrorism," but then at the same time, they started funding those same Islamists. They were there was a covert action signed by Bill Clinton. I'm not sure of the precise date, but that basically allowed the CIA to provide funding to these Islamists that were used to attack Russia in the start of the Second Chechen War, going back in 1999. And then in around 2005, it was reported first by Seymour Hersh, and this was back when Sy was doing just excellent work as an investigative reporter, that the United States, while it was supposedly fighting this global war on terrorism, actually started funding these Islamic groups, the Sunnis, for the express purpose then of attacking Iran, because ISIS and others, they saw Iran as apostates. And so, and then when you get into 2012, what's the United States doing? With Turkey, funding Islamic extremists, the weapons that were flowing out of North Africa through Cyprus into Turkey, and then making their way into Syria to these radical Islamists in order to destroy Bashar Assad and indirectly weaken Iran. And that, they finally succeeded a year or 2 years ago. But Ashara, he was clearly part of the Al Qaeda network in the beginning, and then ISIS and then now Nusra. And then he set up his own, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Again, it was ranked as one of the top terrorist groups in the world there back in 2017, 2018, in terms of attacks and killing civilians. And the attacks were directed at Shia interests. So what we've seen is a consistent pattern of the United States, on the one hand, claiming it's fighting a terrorist war against Islamists, while at the same time supporting those Islamists, paying money to them. And they were doing it because of the hatred of Iran. So, and I didn't even get into the U.S. support for the Mujahideen al-Khalq. They're not exactly a Sunni extremist group per se, though they're not really religious driven. They're more ideologically driven. But nonetheless, again, the United States providing support for terrorism. So, we're seeing that whole track record in the past. Turkey's hands weren't clean in this endeavor either.
Yeah, I understand it. And that's why I think the way that they're doubling down, and they have doubled down in Idlib and right now in Syria, that's a bad news for Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that this guy is not going to back down. They're going to stay there.
Well, and Russia's still there too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're Tartus, and I forget the name of the other base that's out there on the Syrian west coast. But
yeah,
but Putin met with al-Shada. Now, Putin hasn't been involved with that kind of duplicity.
Tartus and Latakia.
Yeah, Latakia. Thank you.
Yeah. And they're going to be back there. It seems that the government in Syria is somehow talking with Russians to get back there. They want Russia because Russia somehow is providing some sort of security for them, in your opinion, or something else. What do they want from Russia? The Russian forces being.
I think secretly they want Russia to help keep the United States out of their pockets.
Mm.
So, yeah, again, the United States has played a double game on this, extremely duplicitous. And we've been gaslighting our own public about, the war on terror. And we always try to make Iran central to the war on terror. And Iran's not the central actor in the war on terror. We are. We, the United States, in terms of the support we've given to these radical Islamists. Sometimes it's direct. Sometimes it's indirect through, CIA working with the Gulf Arabs, getting them to pony up the money. Now, in the past, they ponied up all this money to weaken Iran. And instead, what have they done? Iran's stronger than ever.
Yeah. How, before wrapping up, Larry, how do you see the situation with the Kurdish people in Syria, in the northeast of Syria? And is the United States still supporting them, or
yes,
how much concern is that for Turkey?
Well, it's still a huge concern for Turkey. It's a huge concern for Iran. And it's unfortunate for the Kurdish people because it's not like they're united. They're not united. They've got, some that work with the United States, some that work with France, some that will even work with Turkey. And so, yeah, it's not a good situation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always, and tomorrow at the same time.
Well, okay, let's talk.
Has been told for decades that China was their danger. China wanted to take them over. And before that, it was the Russians what done it. And you recall the extraordinary effort made by Canada to arrest and detain under house arrest and prosecute the daughter of the founder of Huawei. Well, it turns out it wasn't the Russians or the Chinese that were any danger to Canada at all. It was the United States of America, whose bidding successive Canadian prime ministers have done for decades. There was no demand that any American president would make of them. But eating Argentine meat might well have been the last straw. And mind you, if you break the camel's back, you could start eating camels. Why not? They are now butchering wild horses in the United States of America and selling them at $25 a piece for food. Well, the ranchers are revolting in the United States, not about the fate of the wild horses, but about the fate of the American farmer, which is going south in order to facilitate some class of bailout, a food bailout for Milei, the miracle worker of Argentina. Trump said on the airplane tonight, well, the Argentines are dying. We've got to do something to help them. But it's Trump's friend who's the president of Argentina. And remember his chainsaw? Maybe he was looking to butcher a wild horse or two. But I digress. Canada says it is now in a war with the United States of America. That's the Canada that we were told was an indispensable Five Eyes NATO ally of the United States of America. Well, now they're at war. Somebody call Article 5 or 7 or all these articles and chapters. I'm beginning to forget them. It's 25th Amendment I'm looking for in Washington. But we've now got two NATO countries at war with each other, according to the Prime Minister of one of them, the Prime Minister of Canada. Trump has just slapped the mother of all tariffs on Canada, his nearest neighbor. He continues to demand publicly that Canada bows to them and accepts its fate as the 51st state of the United States of America, although they'll need to hurry up because Greenland might beat them to it. Oh, wait, Denmark, which owns Greenland, is also in NATO. So there's two NATO conflicts. No, three, because Trump has already declared war on Spain, wants nothing more to do with them. He earlier declared war on Italy. He withdrew his troops from Germany. This madman, in a paroxysm of pique, is threatening war or making war all over the world. How's it going to work out with Canada? I mean, the Rocky Mountains are quite good terrain for guerrilla fighting. And as I recall from my many coast-to-coast speaking tours of Canada, there's a lot of thickly wooded areas. Those thickly wooded areas would conceal a Mountie or two, would conceal a backwoodsman, no doubt, or two. He could arm himself with the muskets that they were buying in such profusion, in fear of a Russian or a Chinese invasion of their magnificent country, the second biggest country in the world. But I don't think they've got an army. I don't think they've got an air force. I don't think they've got a navy. And if they do, it's a Gilbert and Sullivan one, which is kind of Trump's point. They want the protection of the United States nuclear umbrella without actually being a part of the United States. Mind you, who'd want to be a part of the United States? Have you seen it recently? Have you seen the streets around the University of California, Berkeley? I saw today, Berkeley, you'd think, I mean, it conjures up Elysian fields, but it's actually a camp of junkies, of homeless people,
of desperate people, of poor people. And that's just Berkeley. Have you seen Philadelphia? Who'd want to be a part of the United States of America? The mass shootouts in malls, in cinemas, in clubs, in schools, in colleges, in universities are now practically a daily occurrence. So it's hardly surprising that Canada ain't that keen on becoming the 51st state. So we have the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. But that's not the only place where that's happening. And I don't just mean Greenland. I don't just mean Spain. I don't mean Italy or Germany
Salute.
or any of the other satrapies that haven't agreed to fall to their knees in front of Donald Trump, which by all accounts is a very dangerous place to be. I refer to Iran. Is there a war against Iran or not? Well, tomorrow, a new kind of war is to be launched. It's called all-out war. It's all-out war of siege to starve the Iranians to succumb, to surrender. And moreover, according to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, a new form of sanction warfare is to be unleashed tomorrow on Iran, a more comprehensive, a more savage regime of sanctions than has ever been seen anywhere in the world, in all history. Well, having seen as I did the up-close and personal effects of the United States sanctions siege on Iraq in the late 90s and in the early part of this century, I don't really look forward to seeing what that siege might produce. But here's the rub. Trump has threatened everybody else in the world who do not accept his medieval siege tactics. He's threatened them with economic oblivion. The one major problem with that is that the country trading most heavily with Iran is the People's Republic of China, which has rejected Trump's illegal sanctions. For illegal they are. Only the United Nations Security Council can impose extraterritorial sanctions on anybody, although the US has been doing it against Cuba for many decades past. It is flatly illegal. And China will not obey illegal sanctions regimes. So China has already declared that it does not recognize these new sanctions that Trump will impose upon Iran this very morrow. How's that going to work? Given the United States completely needs China. It's begging China for rare earth materials and other things. It can't survive. Its military can't survive without trade with China. And if they dream of unleashing a blizzard of economic sanctions against China, China will retaliate dollar for dollar, pound for pound, item for item. And then there's the fact that Trump is about to receive a state visit by the president of China, Xi Jinping. How's that going to go? What kind of atmosphere will be involved in that state visit? That is, if Xi Jinping even goes, he might say, well, if you're about to launch an economic war to oblivion against us, then it's probably not the best time for a state visit to the United States. But then the two of them are due to meet in China itself at the APEC conference in Shenzhen in just a few weeks' time. What's that going to be like? If Trump has unleashed a hurricane against Iran aimed at China so that China somehow suffers a loss of energy exports from Iran? What kind of madness is this? Of course, it goes without saying that the Iranians are not going to buckle because Donald Trump's going to sanction them. They've been sanctioned for 45 years. They've never been anything other than sanctioned. What are these miracle new sanctions that Scott Bessent has in mind that will be different from decades of sanctions? We'll ask our expert guests precisely that. But I want to turn to the most remarkable war announced by Donald Trump this week. He threatened to use the US military on the bond market. Now, it may be that his cognitive decline is such that he thought the reporter was asking him about the bomb market, although what the bomb market is, I don't know. And why your answer to a question about the bomb market would be yes, bomb them, but that's exactly what he said. Speaks far too much, Donald Trump. He really needs to throw away that phone, or that young woman that carries his diaper bag needs to take his phone away from him. But he said, when she asked him how he was going to resolve the crisis in the bond market, which sees yields all over the place, even when the United States buys back some of its own debt, he said, we've got the most powerful military in the world and will not be afraid to use it. What are you going to do? Kill the people that won't buy your bonds? Bomb the people who don't want your debt? Japan is about to unload a fortune in American Treasury bills tomorrow, as reportedly is China. It's going to be a terrible day on the markets for the United States of America tomorrow. Donald Trump, of course, already have done his stockbroker call, as will Barron, as will the rest of the family. They'll be trading like Billy O. Having influenced the market, they'll seek to profit from it in a Rabelaisian flurry of corruption such as has never been seen on planet Earth before. Time is running, so I need to turn to the Ukraine. Witkoff and Kushner were expected, perhaps tomorrow, certainly the day after, certainly this coming week in Moscow. But they're now not coming. The optimist would say that's because something's up. The pessimist would say that the only thing up is the likelihood of Zelensky's political or worse demise as the crisis in the Ukraine deepens. The Corruption Bureau, NABU, it's a great name. They're definitely nabbing Zelensky's closest aides right now on corruption that would make your eyes water. And it's all on tape. And NABU, which actually works for the United States rather than the Ukrainian state, has got the goods, got the receipts, got the stolen money and gold and the ingots of all kinds of precious metals. And the people they're nabbing are the top people in Zelensky's circle. There's also the growing demands from the man that used to be the defense minister in Ukraine, as well as many others, for an election in Ukraine. After all, if Russia can have an election in the middle of a war against 27 NATO countries, why can't Zelensky? The answer is obvious. Zelensky would lose. Putin is going to win. There's so much else that I need to talk about, but I wanted to spend just a moment on Kushner's meeting today with Hakeem Jeffries, the putative leader of a Democratic Party-controlled Congress. The fact that they met at all is a clear indication that all claims to the contrary, Trump knows his goose is cooked. Goose. Why don't they try goose? Let them eat goose rather than wild horses. His goose is cooked in November, which is coming up fast. And so why Kushner met Jeffries was, first of all, to make it clear that it's a big club and you're not in it. There's no reason for any nastiness or unpleasantness just because one cheek takes over from the other cheek. They are, after all, part of the same ass. But the second big takeaway from this is that this guy Jeffries is a joker. And yet he's supported by the mayor of New York. He's supported by AOC. If he's going to be Kushner's man in a Democratic-controlled Congress, what's the point of changing the Congress at all? And so I hope the Democrats have any idea that they're going to win the presidency in 2 years' time, they have to sharpen up their political profile, not blunt it by some kind of sweetheart deal that the Democrats will take control but won't really do anything with it. Garland Nixon will know what's happening. He's up next. Stay tuned. It's the mother. He's the coolest cat in the West and the best informed in America. Garland, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. I'm tempted to say, who's getting it first, Canada or Greenland?
You know, we're in a situation now where Donald Trump generally, declares some kind of war, economic war, kinetic war on a country or two almost weekly. So while, right now we're talking about, this huge economic war and tariffs against Canada, I kind of have the feeling that by the end of the week, it'll be something else. Who knows what country he'll be declaring tariffs on. So he makes these grand proclamations. He gets involved in these dust-ups with other leaders. I think he really enjoys that kind of stuff. And it gives him the ability to distract us from the catastrophe that he's facing both in the Middle East and in Ukraine. So I think that, we'll talk about this for a while, but I tend to feel that it will get settled fairly quickly because a lot of major companies stand to lose money from this. So I think, personally, I think it'll be settled within a week or so.
But it's an exquisite irony that the Canadians, having spent decades doing the US's bidding on every international conflict, every war, and who have been telling their own people that the biggest danger to them was China, and the second biggest danger to them was Russia. Turns out it's Donald Trump that's their biggest danger, according to him at least.
Well, and what we're seeing now is that a desperate and kind of crumbling empire is furious at everyone. And this is simply, it seems to me that an angry Donald Trump always punches whoever is the closest person to him. Look what's happening right now with South Korea. President Trump is having the same kind of a war, a battle with South Korea. He's furious at the South Koreans because they won't join him in this, feudal attempt to overthrow the government of Iran. So we see country after country former ally after ally starting to fall by the wayside, falling from President Trump's good graces. And I think it's just indicative of a very, very unstable empire led by an unstable president.
Yeah, I mean, his cabinet colleagues seem content when you see them lined up behind him. They're clapping like seals and nodding like dogs. No sign of that famous 25th Amendment yet. Let's turn to the proximate reason for concern. Tomorrow, he's going to unleash a new kind of war on Iran. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so once again, we're getting the, kind of similar to what President Obama said back in 2012. We're going to unleash these massive sanctions on Iran, and it's going to wipe Iran out. I think it also kind of demonstrates that the actual kinetic war is lost, because if you defeated Iran, on the battlefield, as Trump says, and if all of their military capabilities have been destroyed, you would have no reason to do this. So it demonstrates that the actual physical part of the war has been lost. I think what's interesting about this is Iran's reaction, which demonstrates that Iran has some very, very powerful cards to play, because what the Iranians have said is this: that any country who abides by Donald Trump, the U.S.'s new sanctions regime, will be barred from the Straits of Hormuz permanently. So now countries, again, have to, they have to start thinking that, yes, the United States will hurt us now, but we have to think about the long term. Additionally, I think that since China, probably does more energy business with Iran than anyone else, and of course Russia, who's under like 20,000 sanctions, they do a lot of business, particularly foodstuffs and various things like that. If those two countries do not comply with the sanctions, which neither of them will, the sanctions become irrelevant. And as you probably know, one of the things that sanctions do is they just create black markets. They create the ability for certain people to get around the sanctions and to do a little bit of a markup. So all Donald Trump's doing is creating some new black markets, and he's putting another black mark on his presidency, in that, again, within weeks, this will fall apart and he'll come up with something. And of course, Scott Bessent will tell us that he doesn't understand why it doesn't work, but the next one's going to work. That's for darn sure. It's a clown show we're watching, and it's quite frankly embarrassing as an American to watch these people.
Yes, I mean, it's good you mentioned China, because the sanctions don't work without China, and China has already rejected them. In fact, China's position is completely principled. It does not obey illegal sanctions, and these are illegal sanctions. The United States can sanction anybody it likes, but it can't force anybody else to sanction anybody. And that's what Trump is demanding that other countries in the world do. He's threatened oblivion to anybody trading with Iran, which in this case preeminently means China, the same China whose president is about to visit the United States. What is he going to pull the chair away from the Chinese president rather than put it in for him like he did with Netanyahu?
Well, I think he'll visit with generally the way it works, President Trump will visit with him, and immediately afterwards, he'll announce some grand deal that the Chinese will have no idea what he's talking about. They'll have a press conference, or he'll have a press conference and say, we had a great deal, a deal like no one could ever imagine. No one's ever seen a deal with this. And we'll ask the Chinese, and they'll say, we don't know what he's talking about. We didn't make any deal with him. So that's what I expect from President Trump. And I tell you, these economic sanctions on Iran are analogous to the military attack on Iran, in that the United States can't accept that we don't have the military capability to dominate Iran and dominate the world. And we still, Pete Hegseth and Trump say we've got the most powerful military, we've destroyed Iran. So they're still pretending that we have the military capability to defeat Iran, even if we don't. They're also pretending that we have the economic power to rule the world and to dominate people. It is a refusal to accept the limits of American power and the death of American hegemony, such as it ever was.
And the deaths and blood of 774 United States service personnel. These numbers are rather different from the kind of boastful triumphalism of Hegseth. 774 American service personnel have lost their lives or shed their blood as wounded in a war which none of the networks told us the Americans were bleeding in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, it's just a terrible tragedy. And I still feel as though that the numbers of dead and wounded are still significantly higher than we're being told, even higher than that 774. And as we know, usually a couple years later, we get the truth. And this is not just the Trump administration that does this, playing with the numbers. The Iranians, we always say that the adversary has lost far more people than they've lost, and we've lost far less. So, but this game, the game is over. The world knows that we've lost. We do have numerous politicians now that are starting to discuss the reality here in America. And they're saying, well, we lost the war. It's obvious that we lost. But I don't see the Trump administration ever being able to say we lost the war. All they can do is declare victory. Now they're moving in another direction, which is economic, and that's not going to have any other any better success. And I think we're looking at now an economic catastrophe for the United States, a political catastrophe. Although I don't know the Democrats, if anybody can screw this thing up in the midterms, it's the Democrats. So who knows what the heck's going to happen by the midterms? I'm guessing that maybe some of the independent candidates, Sam Husseini, who I believe you've had on before, is running. So I'm guessing and hoping that some of the independent candidates will have the opportunity to get elected, because by the time we get to November, we're going to be in a catastrophic position here in the United States.
Well, we'll come back to the U.S. domestic scene in just a minute, but if it's obvious the Americans have lost the war, it's equally obvious the Iranians have won it. The news breaking that this pact, they're calling it the Mecca Pact now, between Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, turns out they've asked Iran to join it. That's quite a considerable diplomatic victory for Iran, but also a very big shift. These are three Sunni powers. Saudi Arabia was, until what seems like a month or two ago, practically at war itself with Iran. Now, Iran appears to have been invited to join the club. That would be a big, big shift, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think symbolically it's a big shift. I think it's symbolic that they're all angry at the United States, and of course that they all feel threatened by Israel. The Israelis are now attacking Turkish interests in Syria. I don't feel, although some people may believe that it is a material group that's coming together. I don't, because I mean, the Pakistanis said, if anybody attacks Saudi Arabia, we're in. Well, at the time they signed that, the Houthis were attacking Saudi Arabia, and they still haven't. And the Pakistanis, I don't think, are going to get in. So I think, while I'm not saying that to say this is not a significant group of countries coming together, it's a great symbolism. I don't think they're preparing for war as a defensive team against anyone else but Israel. Israel is the one that's threatening all of them, and I think they understand that one by one, they're being marked for attack by the Israelis, and I think they probably feel if we come together like this, the odds of Israel attacking them are significantly lower. But the Israelis plan on using the United States kind of like their version of Ukraine as cannon fodder anyway. We are to the Israelis what Ukraine is to NATO.
Now, coming back home, I can't resist this. I'm a lover of wild horses myself, and you're now capturing them in the wild and selling them at $25 a piece and sending them to the butcher because the price of butcher meat in your country has reached crisis stage. And then Trump tells us you're about to buy hundreds of tons of beef to try and bring the price down, but he declines to tell us at first from where you're buying that beef. Now turns out it's from the Argentine. That might well be the batch that China rejected because it was toxic. When it arrived in China from Argentina, they sent it back. They don't want it. It's filled with all kinds of horrors. Well, you're going to get it now. So you're going to be dining on wild horse meat and rancid Argentine meat. This is another Trump wheeze that has backfired within hours of being announced.
Well, I was recently looking at some documents about our beef industry, and I mean, like 77 cattle herders a day are going out of business. You know, one of the things that we're dealing with now is a significant rise in diesel fuel, and of course, you know, all of our produce industry, all of our animal production, and et cetera, you know, suffers greatly. There are a number of things happening. Let's not forget the tariffs. The tariffs on all of these other countries means that we can't sell a lot of things to other countries. Or the bottom line is this: anything that Canada buys from us that's being tariffed, there's likely another country that's going to sell it to them cheaper than the tariff. So these tariffs are having significant impacts on our ability to be viable in the international market. And I think issues such as beef and, God forbid, horse meat are just examples of the repercussions of the Trump administration's international economic policies. And you know, just listen to Scott Bessent. Just look at this guy. The other day we had he was asked by a reporter about the price of oil going up, and his answer was, I really don't know why it's going up. Now, we all know he was lying, but the fact is that he's not even smart enough to make something up is what's really horrifying. So I think what we're looking at on so many levels are just the ramifications of incompetent people who don't understand how international markets work and who are extremely narcissistic, and they don't understand the limits of power. And they're caught back in the 1950s thinking that they can just issue orders all around. And these things, one by one, are coming back to haunt us. And now we're going to have poisoned beef and horse meat, I guess, in our supermarkets. And I don't know if people are going to buy it. I'm not. I'll just say that.
I'm glad to hear that. As a horse lover myself, it's simply horrifying thought. But you do have some talent. You've got that Hakeem Jeffries, who will be the leader of the Democrats, it would appear, in the Congress after November. And certainly that will be significant if the Democrats win the House, which seems almost certain that they will. The Senate might be something else. He was meeting Jared Kushner today. Kushner, who's supposed to be headed for Moscow to bring about the long-awaited end of the NATO war against Russia, is instead meeting secretly the Democratic leader to agree some kind of gentleman's agreement of how they're going to synthetically oppose each other whilst actually secretly agree with each other. That's what's happened today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the New York Times front page says President Trump's son-in-law and the man in line to be Speaker of a Democratic-led House discussed. What were they discussing? How Democrats and the administration could work together. And one of the things now in the Black community, you know, the comical name for Hakeem Jeffries is Apac Shakur. That's what he's referred to often. But he's a man who's famously said, Israel today, Israel tomorrow, Israel forever. And I think one of the interesting things that's being discussed in light of this, and I think this is important, and you brought it up earlier, that the New York Mayor Mamdani not only endorsed him, but actually one of his fellow Democratic socialists I forgot his name. It was an interesting name, Chia or something like that. But at any rate, nice guy. I've met him before. He was going to run against, he was going to challenge Hakeem Jeffries, and Mamdani made him stand down and protected Jeffries. Additionally, another woman whose name is Angie Nixon, interestingly enough, in Florida, she's a Democratic socialist. And she won the Senate primary. She'll be running in the Senate for the Senate as the Democrats. But as soon as she won, one of the first things she said was, "My hearts go out to the people of Ukraine." And so what people are starting to say, at first a lot of people were excited, oh, Democratic Socialists, maybe they'll, change something. And what people are starting to realize is this: the Democratic Socialists, they rhetorically oppose the Israeli genocide and Israel's actions rhetorically, but when it comes to their concrete actions, they're to oppose it, it's kind of questionable. I mean, you're going to put one of the most vociferous supporters of Israel in Congress. You're going to support this guy to be in charge, and it appears to me that's the only conflict that they don't support. We've had Mamdani saying that Maduro and Diaz-Canel in Cuba are dictators. We've had them, Bernie Sanders, DSA, talking about the protesters in Iran. We must stand with them. So if you look at these DSA people, what you see is the easy thing. Okay, they oppose genocide. Well, that's not a heavy lift. You're not really sticking your neck out far, in my opinion, to oppose genocide. That should be a minimum requirement. But when it comes to the rest of these imperial wars, they seem to be on board with them. And so I think the happiness and the glee of the potential change and reform from DSA candidates is, the shine's starting to wear off that a little bit. When you start, lifting up the hood and kind of looking under the hood a little bit, you start seeing some things that you really don't like.
Any reason to believe that Witkoff and Kushner have anything at all up their sleeve on the NATO-Ukraine war on Russia? Or is there a more banal reason, like they've got a democratic leader to meet, that they're not in Moscow right now?
Well, I think it's pretty clear right now that there are some back channel discussions. The Russians recently, in Russian media, and in fact, in one of President Putin's speeches, he said that the Ukrainians are facing a catastrophic situation, and that the Ukrainians have been reaching out to the Russians using intermediaries that are friendly to the Russians. However, the Russians said that the proposals they made were exotic and unrealistic. So I think the message is probably clear. Look, we're not getting anywhere. There is no point. I mean, Kanye West was in Russia. I guess maybe they he was over there. He'd probably have a better chance of getting a deal. Him and Candace Owens would have a better chance of getting a deal in Russia than Witkoff and Kushner.
Absolutely. Garland Nixon, as always, a tour de force, a tour of the horizon. Thanks for joining us.
Fong. As you can see, I am joined by Saeed Mohammed Marandi, professor at the University of Tehran, to go over the latest developments. Everybody, you should know to hit the like button, and also it has broken that Iran is warning the United States that an earthquake-like retaliation is coming in response to Trump's economic warfare, directly warning all Gulf countries not to join this economic war, and saying that Iran will strike all U.S.-backed Gulf energy infrastructure and all Hormuz bypass routes, including Yanbu and Fujairah. This was said by Mossad Rezai, who is the new head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. He said, "Our boys are ready to take out American economic assets in the region. We have not targeted American companies in the region yet, and everyone knows the U.S. has many of these. So, Professor Marandi, let's begin actually with this. Talk about what you believe Iran is planning when it comes to retaliation to this economic war. We don't really actually know what Trump is planning just yet. It hasn't been announced so specifically, but Iran is being very specific, saying U.S. oil assets and anything connected to them are on the table. What's your assessment of this?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure. We're at war, and there is no ceasefire. People should keep that in mind. There is no ceasefire between us and the United States or the Israeli regime or the countries that are hosting and assisting the United States in this war. So the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, the Omanis, even Jordan, all of these countries, they are hosting U.S. forces. Some of them are funding the U.S. forces in their countries, like for example, the Kuwaitis, the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Emiratis. They're paying for this occupation. So they're assisting the United States in waging war against Iran in multiple ways. And in fact, these countries have waged 3 wars against Iran, this broader coalition. In 1980, when Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, the United States encouraged him to do so. The United States and the West supported Saddam, and U.S. proxies in the region, these very same countries, they gave him hundreds of billions of dollars to kill Iranians. That was a war of aggression. Then last year, when the Americans and the Israelis carried out that so-called blitzkrieg attack, they pretended that they were negotiating with Iran, yet they were preparing for war. Back then, U.S. planes were refueling Israeli jets. Those planes were all flying from these countries. They're taking off from these countries and landing in these countries and using the jet fuel of these countries. And these countries were paying for all U.S. expenses in those bases. So these countries were in fact assisting the Israeli regime aggression. And of course, yes, radar installations were used from Turkey to Iraqi Kurdistan to the entire Persian Gulf region. And of course, Jordan is always central to U.S.-Israeli military and intelligence operations. So then we have this war, which we all know about because it's still ongoing. So at the moment, there's no ceasefire. These countries have waged 3 wars against Iran. And therefore, Iran can punish any of them whenever it wants. Iran can fire missiles right now at the U.S. or at the regimes that host U.S. bases. All of them are part of this war. It's really extraordinary how during the last 6 months, you see these regimes pretending as if they're victims. Say, why is Iran striking us? You see some of their, they're the people on the payroll, also Qatari payroll, Saudi payroll, Emirati payroll, online saying, why is Iran doing this injustice? So the missiles are fired from their territory. The aircraft fly over their airspace. The refueling planes are based in their territory using their fuel for free, and then they have the audacity to complain and pretend that they have nothing to do with this. And instead of striking the Americans, Iran is striking them. Whereas Iran has destroyed U.S. bases across the region, but also it has punished them as well. In my opinion, and the opinion of most Iranians, the armed forces have been very, very lenient. They have been very kind to these countries. Otherwise, the expectation of many Iranians was to wreck these regimes after what they've done to Iran, not just in this war, but over the years. So Iran has the right to strike out now because we're at war. And the United States is carrying out siege warfare as we speak. So the last night, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, Dr. Mohsen Rezai, or Major General Mohsen Rezai, he also has a PhD in economics. He gave a long interview, a somewhat long interview, not that long, but I would advise your viewers to go and read it in full. And if someone has translated it or with AI, to watch it in full, because it's a very important interview. And I think journalists in the West and everyone should definitely see it, because this is he's made it clear what's going to happen. So tomorrow, Bessent is going to apparently go out and declare what's going to happen. And as you rightly pointed out, we don't know what the plan is. We have some ideas how this could be different. How, for example, they may have approached neighboring countries, Pakistan, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and the others, the regime in Azerbaijan, and others, and Turkey, to tell them to decrease cooperation with Iran. And it's quite possible that these countries will resist to a degree, and to a degree they may go along. Some may fully support them, and some may resist completely. For example, Russia and China, they are going to ignore the Americans. I would assume Afghanistan, the Taliban in Afghanistan, they will ignore the Americans. And by the way, during the past year since the 12-day war, but especially after this war, Iran has been developing land routes for trade to Central Asia, the North-South corridor to Russia, through Afghanistan, and Pakistan as well. So this war has had this benefit for Iran. A lot of the goods that used to come from China to the Iranians through the Persian Gulf, through, let's say, the Dubai, now they're coming in through Central Asia. I've spoken to people who've actually who are involved in this, and they've said that the things are evolving. It's going to take time, of course, to get where they need to get. But in any case, the Iranians, I would assume, they are preparing themselves for these threats that are being put out there by the United States. And what is the objective? The objective is to strangle Iranian citizens. It is to starve them. It's a starvation siege. And this just shows once again that the collective West, and again, when we say the collective West, because sometimes when I say the West or the collective West, I get people saying, we are opposed to this. Why do you say when I say the collective West or the West, I mean the political elites, those who are in charge. It doesn't mean the citizens. We know, in fact, in Iran, it's widely understood that a strong majority of Americans opposed the war from day one, and that majority is growing. So when I say the collective West, that's basically what I mean. The Iranians right now, they are waiting to see what the United States is going to do, and they're guessing that the United States is going to threaten countries or to encourage countries to cut off all ties with Iran. And as I said, some countries are not going will ignore them, but other countries will probably want to play along. Iran said that this barbaric act of war, this attempt to starve Iranians, and I've seen some senator go on a Sunday morning show during the first siege 3-4 months ago, when it began, the siege where they blocked Iranian ports, which is ongoing as we speak. A senator went on US TV and he was gloating about how the Iranians don't have food and how they're hungry, and it was disgusting. And it just shows how disgusting Western elites are. They're diplomats, they're politicians, whenever I drive by a Western embassy, I think that these people are just a bunch of criminals. But in any case, they represent criminal regimes, and so they're criminals. So the Iranians are going to play hardball. The Iranians say that if any country in the region, if any country helps the United States to strangle Iranian people, Iran will punish that country and punish it badly. And Iran will use military means. So let's say the countries in the Persian Gulf, in one way or another, they assist the United States. They won't be able to export a drop of oil. Not through the Strait of Hormuz, as you rightly pointed out, not through Fujairah, and not through the Red Sea. Nothing. It'll be over. And if they try to do so, they'll be badly punished. If planes are not allowed to travel to Iran, then their airports will be shut down. In other words, Iran is going to play hardball. This is war. The Americans, just like the 40 days of fighting where they tried to overthrow Iran, destroy Iran, this is war. So we will use we will defend ourselves. Basically, General Reza is saying by any means necessary, as the late Malcolm X would say. It's basically saying by any means necessary, we're going to react because this is the most vicious and inhumane type of warfare that the United States is pursuing. And it's only pursuing this because everything else has failed. Siege warfare, blocking the sea, has failed. The military onslaught against Iran has failed. Not only did Iran survive, Iran defeated the combined force of the United States and the Israeli regime and its regional proxies. That's a big deal. It didn't survive, it defeated them. And it defeated them twice. And it defeated them at siege warfare. And it forced Trump to sign the MOU, personally sign it. And so now we're back to war. And Iran is not going to pull any punches. So what does that mean? It means that if Trump is serious about this policy, I do think it will cause collapse, but not in Iran. It will lead to the collapse of Kuwait, of the Emirates, of Qatar, of Bahrain, of Saudi Arabia, and the list could continue. I mean, if Baku decides to block the route between Iran and Russia, well, then Iran could easily take out Baku's oil facilities and prevent them from exporting any more oil to the Israeli regime through Turkey, because most of the Israeli regime's oil goes through Turkey, even at a time when there's saber rattling between the two. Turkey is the main transporter of oil to Israel. So, and much of that oil goes through, most of that oil, if I'm not mistaken, goes through Baku, or is from Baku. So in any case, if any country participates in this, Iran, the General Reza says, we will punish that country. He says that we'll first speak with them, and then if they don't step aside, then we'll punish them. And he also said that so far we've refrained from destroying U.S. assets in the region, but that will come to an end. So you go after our economy, you go and try to strangle our people, we will destroy your assets. So I think Iran could actually be much tougher this time round than the 40-day war. And I have no doubt that the United States will fail. But what I do think will probably happen if Trump takes this seriously, if he does not taco, as you say in the United States, I think that we are heading for a global economic meltdown. And we're already seeing signs of economic instability. I know you cover this a lot on your show with economists, but just very briefly, the situation has been worsening for many years now because of the endless wars, because of neoliberalism and all that. But now we see indications of an economy on the brink. The yen is in trouble. The bond market is in trouble. And then, Danny, something that I haven't seen discussed at all is the fact that the governments, the regimes in the Persian Gulf, they have huge amounts of money in the United States, in bonds and stocks, assets, in the bank, in their bank accounts. These governments are not making much money anymore. They're making very little money. And they're in deep trouble, especially because they consume a lot of wealth in order to sustain their lifestyles, in order to sustain their image, in order to, for Dubai to be Dubai, for Doha to be Doha, and so on. So they're going to need their money back. They're going to have to sell bonds and stock and assets just to survive. But if this war continues, and I don't think the Americans will let them do it. I don't think the Americans will let them sell their bonds. I don't think these countries will ever see the bulk of their bonds ever again. But in any case, these countries will need huge amounts of money. And in the weeks and months ahead, it's going to get a lot worse, far worse than what it was before. And I don't think they can sustain themselves anymore. And they're going to start, and they're no longer sending, because when they would, under normal circumstances, they would sell their oil, they would sell their natural gas, they would sell their fertilizer, their helium, their sulfur, and so on, and aluminum. And then a lot of that wealth would go to purchase more bonds, or to purchase more stocks, or to invest in the United States. Trump was actually expecting them to invest trillions of dollars for his AI projects. That's not going to happen. That's come to an end. But the reverse will have to happen. These countries, in order to survive, they're going to need to sell all of those assets just to continue to exist. I don't see the Americans allowing them to do that. But if they do, it's going to create a crisis and help create a crisis in the bond market. The Japanese don't want to be involved anymore. They need to protect their currency. The Chinese are already leaving. These countries are no longer contributing anything, and it's going to gradually, or not gradually, it will have to be reversed. This is a very bad situation for Trump, and I have no doubt that the Iranians have one eye on the midterm elections. And if things go downhill for the United States in the next 2.5 months, and based on what General Reza is saying is going to happen, it's definitely going to go downhill. Then I think Trump will lose the midterms badly. He'll probably lose the Senate too if things continue like this. And then his priorities are going to have to change after November, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. Great points, Professor Morandi. And you mentioned countries that are going to be punished for collaborating with the United States. Even now, with the talks of a potential, and I think what some people are wondering is if the Trump administration will try to do some kind of quote unquote land blockade, aka try to get these Gulf states to cut off ties with Iran to the point where even transporting goods across the region will be very difficult for Iran. But even with this talk of Iran acting in its own self-interest and striking these countries if they do that, and U.S. oil assets along the way, you have Qatar here striking a deal with the United States on refueling tankers, which are the exact kind of tankers needed for the United States to conduct hostile operations, meaning Qatar is obviously one of those countries that is collaborating with the United States. And Iran has said, this was going around too from IRIB News, I'm sure you saw it, Professor Morandi, that Iran's military chief just toured a secret underground ballistic missile plant and declared that there's a major wartime production boom underway. Quality is higher, capabilities are greater, and volume is way up. In effect, Iran has the capabilities and the means to strike. So it isn't just talk, which makes me wonder, Professor Roddy, what would be exactly the aim of this starvation campaign? It's not like sanctions are new to Iran, But for the United States to try to escalate it in a more direct manner seems to be suicide. And the signs are all here in the United States and in the West. Gas prices are not coming down. Diesel fuel is way high. It's almost $6 a gallon for diesel fuel, even in the cheapest of areas. That's a crisis that's teetering. This could push it over the edge. Your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a desperate stab in the dark. It's a vicious stab in the dark directed at women and children. And it shouldn't surprise us because that's what they did to Syria. They destroyed Syria. They starved Syria through the Caesar Act to crush the population and basically prepare the grounds for the establishment of an Al Qaeda regime, or Cuba, or Venezuela. And of course, Besson mentioned Cuba and Venezuela in his when he was speaking, I think on Friday. So the examples of these two countries, but Qatar and the others, they are extremely vulnerable. Remember, they have nothing but oil and gas. Nothing. Iran is virtually self-sufficient in its agriculture. If there's a good rain, then it's self-sufficient. If it's not a good rain, then they have to import substantial amounts of some goods. This year it's been pretty good, not great, but pretty good. So Iran doesn't need to import a great deal. It's self-sufficient, and many people are working in the agricultural industry in Iran. Iran, because of the sanctions, has its own indigenous industrial base. It produces a lot of its own goods. If you go to any supermarket in Iran, almost everything is Iranian. There's very little that's from anywhere else, unless you go to this high-end supermarket in wealthy neighborhoods where some people have to have their foreign chocolates, or they have to have their their cornflakes or whatever it is that they like. But still, most of the goods there are Iranian too. Even in other neighborhoods, they have these things as well. But for the most part, in any case, these are Iranian products. So you go to shops, most things are produced in Iran. It doesn't mean that, and that's because of the sanctions to a large degree, also because of the mentality of the revolutionaries to develop an indigenous industrial base and to have independence when it comes to agricultural products. That's also, the part of the revolutionary model. But there's no doubt that if the United States wages this war and it has an effect, that it will make life more difficult. But U.S. proxies, for example, in Qatar, which you mentioned, Qatar would collapse if Iran directed its wrath towards the regime. It has nothing. It only has gas. And if Iran destroys its gas facilities with a few, I don't know, a couple of dozen missiles, or let's say a couple of dozen missiles and a few dozen drones, then it's finished. It's back to square one. There's nothing left. And the same is true with all the other countries in the Persian Gulf region, every single one of them. They're just deserts with oil and gas. And so the Americans are putting them at risk. And they, of course, since they have no independence or sovereignty, no dignity or honor, they are obedient to the United States. They know that the Americans are dragging them through hell. They were fearful of the collapse of their regimes during the 40-day war. And I said this on your show on multiple occasions, that if the United States and the Israeli regime strike Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran will destroy their critical infrastructure. And they knew that if that happened, they would be wiped out. Everyone would have to leave. And that's probably, almost definitely, the reason why the United States didn't ultimately move in that direction, because it would be the big loser. Because all of its allies in the region, when it's destroyed, that would create a global economic meltdown, and it would have devastating consequences for the U.S. economy. And what is happening now is similar to that, because Iran has said that it is going to deal with these countries militarily if they participate in this warfare against women and children. They will strike back militarily. And if the Americans want to strike at Iran, Iran will strike back at them. Iran is prepared for war. And you mentioned a very important word in when you were describing the clip. That was a plant. It wasn't a base. That was not a drone or missile base. And as I was saying from the beginning of the war, Iran has underground factories. It has R&D, it has factories for missiles and drones. It is producing missiles and drones far more swiftly than the Americans can produce missiles or anti-missile systems. And there's nothing that the United States can do about it, because these underground bases exist across the country, just like the underground missile bases and drone bases and command and control structures. There's nothing that the Americans can do about it. So every day that goes by, Iran is moving ahead of the United States militarily, because while the Americans are scratching their heads trying to figure out how to increase their air defense systems, the Iranians are turning out new missiles with better capabilities, especially since during the war, the Iranians learned a lot. And we saw the difference between True Promise 2 and 1, and then the difference between True Promise 3 and 2, and then 4 and 3. And then this 13-day war with the Americans started after tearing up the MOU, when Trump violated the MOU, and then ultimately tore up the whole thing. When he restarted the war, we saw that Iranian missiles and drones were even more devastating than during the 40 days of fighting. So the Iranians have been developing their military capabilities during this period, advancing swiftly. It's not going to end well for the United States. I don't like war. I don't like siege warfare. I don't want anyone to get hurt or killed. But if Besant is actually going to carry out some sinister siege warfare against Iran, I think that the global economic collapse will be very swift.
What do you make of, Professor Marandi, the reports? There are a few of them around this that are a bit contradictory, or maybe actually they align, where you have Mohammad Ghalibaf saying that there are a host of Gulf countries lining up with private messages to Iran, saying they want an independent security framework with Iran without the United States' involvement. And then you also have reports that Iran may have been invited to this so-called Mecca security pact between Turkey, Pakistan, and who was the third one? Saudi Arabia. What is your thoughts on this? Or is there any facts to this? And if so, I mean, for Gulf states to be lining up to conduct an independent security arrangement with Iran would directly undermine these plans for the Gulf to be used as not just a military outpost, which has been destroyed by Iran, but an economic war outpost. Your thoughts on this?
Well, if these countries survive, ultimately that's what they're going to have to do, because the United States is not going to be tolerated in the Persian Gulf anymore. Its armed forces they won't have the ability to function here. Iran won't allow it. So they're still proxies of the United States. Remember, the United States put these families into power, the British and the Americans. They kept them in power. And these are countries where you cannot criticize the ruling family. In Qatar, you cannot criticize the leader, and it's the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And in the West, they like to call Iran a dictatorship. In Iran, you can say whatever you like. I remember before the war, all those hundreds of Persian media outlets funded in the West, hosted in the West, whether it's TV or online media, or whether it was Telegram channels, or whether it was all these thousands of many thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, Iranians, are employed in these in these many different forms of media outlets in the West, Persian language. So they were saying day and night that before the war, that the leaders in Iran, they fled, and Ayatollah Khamenei, the martyr, that he fled to, I don't know, Moscow or somewhere else, I don't know. I recall some people, the naive pro-Western liberals, were saying, yeah, so and so is in. He went to Moscow. I mean, they would say all sorts of nonsense. They continue to say all sorts of nonsense. Although the liberal element in Iranian society, or the liberal class, let's say, the pro-Western liberal class, they've melted to a great extent after this war. Because people have woken up to the reality of the West. I mean, it's not just Trump. The collective West supported his assault on our country. The collective West supported his siege warfare. No one condemned him for killing 168 kids, which was intentional, in the Minab school, or the killing those girls who are teenage girls who were playing volleyball in La Mer, or when he bombed the hospitals in this last battle, in this 13-day offensive. They bombed a children's cancer hospital in Ahvaz, or the Gandhi Hospital in Tehran. I mean, the crimes committed by the United States and the Israeli regime are just, you can go on forever. But if you go to Gaza, it makes this look small. No one in the West protests against it. No, you don't see parliamentarians in the West signing letters of condemnation. You don't see intellectuals in the West signing these letters of condemnation. Actually, I saw something in The Guardian when they were trying to condemn Iran. It shows how despicable and compromised some of these so-called intellectuals are. But in any case, and again, I've said this many times, and I've been saying it again. People should read about Iran, and again, I advise people to go and buy a book, Going to Tehran, buy Alistair Crook's book, Resistance. Read about Iran, understand Iran, so that they could see through the propaganda. The people who wrote these books were effectively punished because of what they were saying, what they were writing. They were among the elites in their societies, and they were sidelined because of what they wrote, because they just, the elites would not tolerate them. But in any case, so these parliamentarians in Belgium or in Holland or in Norway, or none of them were condemning the United States. You didn't see newspapers condemning the United States. So people in Iran noticed that. Many of the liberals who used to get their political views, I don't want to say everyone, but some of them used to get their political views, from places like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and whatever. And then when they were under fire, when their country was being bombed, they saw the narrative. They'd watch satellite TV at home and see how these people were basically supporting the assault. They hated Trump, but they were supporting the assault. So the liberal class in Iran, the pro-Western liberal class, has melted away to a large. But in any case, the point is that in these countries are dictatorships, and they're authoritarian regimes controlled by families, and the West has installed them. They're not going to deviate, from the West. They will stick with the West. Their kids go there, their families go there for vacation. They take the country's wealth. They have palaces in the West, expensive apartment buildings in your home city, where they go for vacation. And of course, many of them are compromised. We've seen in the Epstein files, some names, from these regimes in the Persian Gulf. So while they would like to have some sort of security arrangement with Iran, At the moment, they just don't have that courage. They will tell the Iranians privately, yeah, I mean, we're not happy with this. And we look at what the United States has done to us. They've wrecked our economies, and it's all for the sake of Israel, and they don't care about us. But they're still not going to do anything about it. As you pointed out, Qatar will continue to purchase weapons from the United States. Basically, these are bribes. These are to so that the Americans won't get rid of them, won't overthrow them. So they have to keep paying. They have what did these countries do with all those military capabilities that they purchased over the last few decades against Iran? They couldn't defend themselves. They can't defend themselves against Yemen. How can they defend themselves against Iran with all that money spent? Why? Because that money was spent for the kickbacks and to please the US government, kickbacks both among Western elites and kickbacks among the princes and the elites over here. So, and with regards to the second point, so these countries, they can't tilt away. You mentioned, what else did you say? You mentioned the second point as well. Oh, the grouping, the Saudis and
The Mecca pact,
Pakistan and Turkey. I've heard, I don't know personally, an MP from has said that Iran has received an invitation. But last night, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, in that interview, which again, I advise people to go and read or watch, he said, we don't know what this is. We have to see what it is. But, it does the whole thing raises a lot of issues because Pakistan has its own priorities. Saudi Arabia has different priorities, and Turkey has its own priorities. And each of them are looking at this agreement from a different angle. This agreement was not signed during during the first weeks of the Gaza genocide. It's been 3 years, and now they're signing it. So it obviously has nothing to do with Gaza. It didn't happen when the Israeli regime was taking over southern Syria. So obviously it wasn't signed to protect Syria. It wasn't signed when the Israeli regime assaulted southern Lebanon and continues to do so. So it's not about Lebanon. It wasn't signed when the Americans and the Israelis assaulted Iran. So, but it was signed when the Saudis, after the Saudis bombed Yemen. And remember, Yemen was the only country alongside Iran, the only country that was supporting the Palestinians. They had survived a genocidal war where all these countries in the region were supporting Saudi Arabia and back then the Emirates against the people of Yemen. The collective West was supporting them from Australia to Canada. And they failed. But Yemen, despite all that, afterwards blocked the Red Sea to stop the genocide in Gaza. When everyone else was collaborating with Israel, when they were transporting oil or purchasing gas or doing trade, Yemen blocked the Red Sea and the Americans waged war against Yemen. So this was signed right after the Saudis bombed Yemen because the Saudis didn't want the blockade lifted because an Iranian passenger plane, a passenger plane with an ordinary crew of men and women, was about to land at Yemen's airport, Sana'a International Airport, and they bombed that airport. So the timing is, all of your viewers can interpret as they may, as they wish. But we'll have to see how things evolve, regardless of what the objectives are for Saudi Arabia. We'll have to see how the situation plays out in the weeks and months ahead. Right now, we have something much, much more important, and that is a new attempt to starve the Iranian people. And Iran will definitely protect its people, whether those countries, whether the Saudis assist the Americans or not, that will determine the fate of Saudi Arabia. If the Emirates assist the Americans, that will determine the fate of the Emirates. If Baku does the same, if anyone does the same, then they will pay the price.
Yeah, in the case of Iran, how can you trust a group of hustlers? And that's how a lot of these countries have operated for so long. Hustlers that operate underneath a much bigger force, which is the United States, especially in the case of Saudi Arabia and,
Well, one
and
thing,
Turkey.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, so Pakistan, the people of Pakistan are really an extraordinary people. They're really fantastic, and Pakistan has many internal problems and many problems with its neighbors. Turkey, its people are very pro-Palestine, like the people of Pakistan, very pro-Palestine. And I haven't seen polls in this regard, but I'm sure if they polled people in Turkey about transporting oil to the Israeli regime, the overwhelming majority would have said that would say that this should immediately be stopped. In fact, when President Raisi was alive, they had that they had that summit in Riyadh for the leaders of the Islamic countries, and President Raisi spoke to leaders saying that cut off ties with the Israeli regime, and like one country, I don't want to name the country, but one country said if everyone else does it, we'll do it. Some countries didn't even say that, but nothing happened. So and then these countries, of course, went and joined the Board of Peace. And since that Board of Peace was put in place, 1,400 Palestinians at least have been murdered, and the genocide is ongoing. And and many more die because of disease, because of a lack of medicine, because of because like some infants, they have particular needs, and the Israelis prevent them from getting them because they want them to die. So ordinary people, many people could live 80 years, 90 years, but they'll die when they're 20 something because they can't take a particular medicine. It's not, and again, the Israelis do this on purpose. They want to exterminate the population. So, but this Board of Peace hasn't done anything at all whatsoever. But the people of the region, they are completely hostile. They're totally hostile towards the Israeli regime, except for people who are on the payroll. And a lot of people are on the payroll. These takfiris, these Salafi, Wahhabi takfiris, and some other so-called intellectuals who, you know how it works.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about this, Professor Marandi, in terms of how Iran also responds to economic warfare, because as we've been talking, economic warfare is not new to Iran. And I'm curious in your comments on this. There are reports coming out of Azerbaijan media saying that Iran and Russia are near signing a contract for the Ras-Shtara Railway, which is a key railway in the international north-south transport corridor. The document has already been finalized and expected to be signed soon by representatives from Iran and Russia, according to IRNA, Iran's news agency. So your comments on this, how do these kind of arrangements undermine U.S. attempts to isolate Iran? Because many have come on the show and said Iran is in fact not isolated at all, and that projects like this and other infrastructure projects, you mentioned China too, that these corridors are being opened up and expanding by the week, by the year. Your thoughts, Professor Marandi?
Well, Iran has 15 neighbors, and it has the Caspian Sea. So Iran has many options. But of course, economic warfare comes at a heavy cost. The Iranians have been under maximum pressure sanctions for many years, and it has had an impact. Iran has been under these sanctions long before Russia. And when Russia was finally sanctioned, the Russians came to Iran, and the Iranians basically gave them a training course, different training courses as to how to deal with the sanctions. So the Russians didn't have to learn the hard way. They learned from the Iranian experience. But Iran suffered a lot from maximum pressure sanctions. And if Trump is serious about doing this, regardless of how Iran is going to respond, it's going to make it more difficult. But Iran's corridors are expanding. This particular corridor is very important. It will not be finished overnight, but and it's been slow. One reason was because the northern part of Iran is all forests, and they're forests um, alongside the Caspian, and this train route has to go through mountainous areas and forests. And the government has, and some of those areas are also privately owned, like some lands or farmlands or whatever. And the government has to purchase that land, and it's very expensive. So that this was delayed, but the government has, as far as I know, the government has now purchased all the land that is necessary for the railway link. So yes, when this is finally completed, it will bring about a sea change in Russian-Iranian economic relations. And of course, as I said, the corridors between Iran and Central Asia and China are growing. The corridor through the Taliban. I mean, Afghanistan is terribly poor. It is just it's a broken country. But this corridor is being a corridor is being developed. The same is true in Pakistan, despite the problems that Pakistan has. So the world is changing, and Iran is integrating with Asia and becoming, it's this is the silver lining in all this, that Iran is being pushed to integrate more with its traditional, its natural partners in Central Asia and in East Asia. But still, the Americans are waging this economic warfare with intention to bring the Iranian people to their knees. This is serious business. And the Iranian response is going to be very serious. And let me go back a bit to history. When the Americans first started economic warfare against Iran, I mean, it began from the beginning of the revolution. Sanctions grew over time. But Obama at one point imposed maximum pressure sanctions. Many people think it started with Trump. It started with Obama. And he called them, I think, brutal sanctions. So he wanted to brutalize the Iranian population. Iran went through tough times, but at that time, Iran's only realistic option was to try to develop its industrial base, to diversify its economy, to find new partners. And back then, Russia and China were still they were weaker than now. They were on the rise, but they weren't where they are now. So Iran's options were limited. Then Trump, when he revived the maximum pressure sanctions, for a couple of years we couldn't export oil. So we have lived without exporting oil for a couple of years. I think 100,000 barrels a day were being exported, but Iran wasn't making money. It was the Chinese carried out, I think, projects in Iran, and they were taking the oil as in return. So Iran wasn't making any money from that oil. So we have survived hardship in the past, and we've survived a couple of years without exporting any oil. And then when President Raisi came to power, he moved to start exporting oil, and gradually by the time he passed away or he was martyred, I still don't know what happened for certain. Iran was exporting at maximum. It was producing and exporting oil and exporting all the oil that it could take out of the ground. So, and which wasn't consumed at home. So we have this experience. Both in the case of Obama and Trump, Iran had no option but to reorganize, to reorient, to develop. And this time Iran has options because we're at war and there's no ceasefire. And these countries assisted and continue to assist the United States. So they will be punished. And if they cooperate with the United States, they will be devastated. So Iran is, it's not just about survival and developing alternative land routes. No, this time Iran is going to strike back, and strike back very hard. And before this round begins, we're already seeing, as I said earlier on, the bond market very shaky, and the Treasury is effectively losing control over the bond market. Doesn't mean it's going to collapse. The economy is going to collapse some more, but the situation is not good for the United States. So the United States is vulnerable, and its proxies are deeply vulnerable, and the Iranians know this. And then you have, as I said earlier, the midterm elections. The Iranians have an eye on those elections. So this is not an ideal situation for the United States. Yes, they can hurt Iran, just like during the fighting, they hurt Iran. As you and I would have our conversations, I recall on a couple of occasions, they were bombing Tehran while we were speaking. And when they bombed Tehran, they kill kids, they kill families, they destroy buildings, they destroy homes, they destroy hospitals, they destroy public facilities. Yes, they do damage. But ultimately, they lost the war. And so what Trump is planning to do, it will definitely, if he carries it out, it will definitely cause damage. But Iran is determined to defeat Trump.
Well, speaking of the bond market, Professor Morandi, I don't know if you saw Trump's comments on it, but there's a contradictory development happening here that I think speaks to a level of desperation now on the part of the empire. Here's what Trump said on the bond market.
Money for the ballroom at all.
Did you direct Secretary Besson to intervene in the bond market?
No, not at all. No, he's a very capable man. He wanted to do it. He's very good at it. He has a good touch, very good natural touch for the bonds and interest, and he did that, yeah.
The yields have come back up since then. Have you talked to him about another type of intervention? Is that something he will be doing?
We have many types of intervention. That's one. The ultimate intervention is our military. And if we have to use that, we will, yeah.
So apparently the United States is going to use the military to intervene in the bond market.
To bomb the bond market.
Which might be a difficult thing, Professor Rodney, because unlike what Trump is saying in the fantasy that maybe his administration is living in, according to a 4-star general, now retired General Barry McCaffrey, the U.S. has lost access to 15 Persian Gulf bases during this war. So essentially, no access in the Persian Gulf militarily.
Yeah, but the whole, what he said doesn't make sense. What does he mean, the military? Like, what is the military going to do for the bond market? That's, ridiculous. In fact,
hammer
warfare,
to a nail.
yeah, whatever. But, as I said, these countries, the Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, they contribute a lot to the U.S. economy. They've sent trillions of dollars there. No, there's no more money going. In fact, it's going to be the reverse. And if this continues, it's going to get much worse. So you have Japan, you have these countries, you have China. This is not a situation where Trump can win. And Iran has done its research. They know what's going on. And Iran's allies are prepared. The resistance in Iraq is prepared for war. Yemen, they are hurting the Saudis badly, and that's not good news for the United States. This is not a situation that will end well. It won't end well for anyone, Danny. I mean, it's not good for anyone, for your viewers, for you, for me. This is not good news for the world. But Trump is doing this for the sake of Netanyahu. He's doing it for the sake of Israel. This is all about Zionism, all the misery that's being imposed on, and it's not just the energy. Some of the catastrophe is going to take time to become clearer for us when the shortages of helium and sulfur and the petrochemicals and the LNG, and the fertilizers and aluminum and all those other things that are produced in the Persian Gulf region. So those shortages are going to grow and grow and grow. And if this phase of economic warfare begins, it's going to become more intense, because that limited amount of fuel that or oil that gets through the strait, it's not going to happen anymore. And the limited amount of whatever, helium or whatever, or LNG that gets through, it's not going to happen anymore. So the pace of the will increase, and the crisis will get far worse, far faster, and it's not good news for anyone. But all for the sake of Zionism, all for the sake of genocide in Gaza. Let's sacrifice the world so that Netanyahu can, and his pilots and his soldiers can snipe kids and bomb kids and starve kids and have their fun.
That is the American regime way, we should say. That's how it's been going for many, many, many years. And this was to close off our show, I think, on a lighter note. Mohammed Ghalibaf, the head of parliament, as well as head negotiator, as well as envoy to China, said this: importing frozen meat to fix meat prices. Okay, that might work. What's the plan for bonds? Import frozen yields, frozen home buyers for housing, frozen paycheck for wages. A frozen foreign policy delivers a frozen economy. The only thing still moving, the Iran boomerang. And here you see the meme, most crushing economic operation ever, coming right back at the one who threw it. Professor Martin, any final comments before we hit end stream here?
Not really. Just the Iranians are going to react very swiftly, very decisively. But still, we always have to remember the Palestine. We have to remember Gaza. We have to remember the kids who are being killed every day, who are being starved. They're preventing medicine from getting in, adequate food supplies. Kids with major problems, and they cannot. They're suffering and they're dying as a result. We have to rebuild. The momentum was wrecked because of the catastrophe in Egypt, the Board of Peace, which destroyed the momentum that was growing across the world. All these leaders that participated, they're responsible. There was momentum growing across the world, especially after the images of those kids who were dying of starvation. When those images came out, it just outraged the world. And instead of building on this momentum, these governments went and whitewashed Trump's crimes and helped bring about a fake peace agreement and destroyed the momentum. So we have to do what we can, all of us, and hopefully we'll see better days ahead. There will be, for the world, it's going to get more difficult, no doubt. I mean, it's clear. Right. But hopefully I have no doubt that things will get better. As the Israeli regime becomes more despised across the world, and people recognize that it's willing to destroy Trump and Netanyahu and the Zionists are willing to destroy the global economy, that hatred will increase, and that will help facilitate. That will help. That'll act as a catalyst for change. Hopefully.
Well said, and hopefully more opportunities for the resistance to deepen and continue onward toward victory. That is, I think, all of our hopes who are watching this program. Professor Marandi, it was great to be with you. We're going to head out now. Hit the like button before you go. Thanks to all the moderators.
they skipped the entire late 20th century American model of aircraft carriers and jets that cost $500 million each, you know, an active interceptor defense model where you fire up these, you know, volleys of $1 million missiles that they can just counter with a new trick with the warhead.
Yep.
And suddenly your Patriots are useless. Whereas they dug for this much less money, using their geography, they built these missile cities right into granite mountains. They can never be, it's people are picturing like a bunker in Kansas straight down. It's not. It's a mountain, a cone with canyon roads. So you have a honeycomb, you know, a grid on different levels of roads big enough for you know, trucks. They don't need support because it's solid rock.
Right.
Once you master that mining technology, you just can bore through mountains. Because remember, they're engineers. They have their own engineering school. They don't need to bring in Germans. They can figure this out. So just like a gopher, what do they call it? The gopher complex, the out in the prairies where the prairie dogs have a town.
Yeah. Yeah.
The prairie dogs have 100 exits. They're not dumb. I mean, the hawk can't get in for one hole, they run out another hole, or the fox.
That's right.
So we can't block their missile cities because they have a dozen exits, and they have bulldozers and things inside ready to go. You know, they've done all the engineering. They make turns. They have expansion chambers just to absorb the blast of a bomb near the door. You know, and then bulldozers waiting there to push it back out. So we don't respect what they've done, and yet we're now on the back heel because our 20th century model is attack planes and refuelers. Yeah. Now they're pushed all the way back to Jordan and Israel. I've got that. There's a map there. The one that shows Jordan and Israel on the left, and it says the reality that is preventing the next full-scale
Stephanie, can
attack.
you pull that up? Do you have that one, Stephanie? Is that the one you're talking about, Matt?
That's it. That's
perfect.
It. So
perfect.
So we relied on active defense. So we don't need to build hardened aircraft shelters. We don't need to.
That's right.
Nobody can touch our base, right?
That's right.
We'll just.
By the way, it's true in the Pacific as well. We have no base defenses against Chinese missiles in the Pacific.
And even if you build hardened aircraft shelters for your fighter bombers that are fairly small relatively, you know, they look like a big Quonset hut of concrete.
Mm-hmm.
They don't make them big enough for 707 sized KC-135 tankers. Mm-hmm. So the tankers are always going to be your Achilles heel because they're always just going to be out in the open with those big long wings, you know, that any kind of damage and the plane can't take off. So last year during the 12-day war, when they were firing missiles at each other and the beginning of this war, they said, oh, they've got this cluster warhead. And they dropped some on Tel Aviv, and people were derisive and said, oh, it's really, you know, it's a waste because there's 80 small, 30 kilogram warhead explosive charges. And I thought that was just a warning. That's made for an airport. That, you know, depending on the altitude that it's dispersed, it can spread wider or like a shotgun pattern. That's made for aircraft that are parked at Ben Gurion.
Well, and there's a reason that I had somebody on, I can't remember who now, who was tracking what's going on domestically in Israel. Apparently, the union of airport workers at Ben Gurion in the last week or so have done walkouts, and they're protesting because they don't like the fact that, first of all, they're not paid apparently as well as they'd like to be because of all of the presence of U.S. refuelers, and they're saying it makes them a big target and they're not protected.
So they've moved much of them to the southern corner of Israel, down near, you know, on the Gulf of Aqaba.
And I think you have a map of that you sent us.
Yeah, that's right there. That one that's up, but it shows how most of our aircraft that are either in Ben Gurion, not so many now, but they've pushed them down to these airfields in Jordan and in the bottom corner of Israel. The thing about them is you can't park them on sand. You can't drag them out into the desert. You can't even put them on asphalt because it's too hot for asphalt.
Yes.
They've got to be on concrete aprons.
Yep.
And that means the more you put down there, the closer they're packed together. So what the Iranians have invested in are these ballistic missiles, all classes, 500-kilometer range up to 2,000-kilometer range, that can hit those bases in 10 minutes. So if we do a big air attack, like if Trump occasionally threatens we're going to go, or General Keane, finish the job, one more big air attack, as soon as those aircraft are taking off, and the Chinese and the Russians are sitting with the Iranians now looking at the same monitors. So, and in 2026, anybody with a cell phone anywhere can just take pictures of aircraft landing, taking off. So the geolocation and timing of all of this, you can't keep it a secret anymore. It's called persistent surveillance, 24 hours a day or night. Planes start taking off. The Iranians know about it immediately. So if they calculate that this is the big attack coming, they can hit those bases in 10 minutes. It takes the airplanes an hour to take off and get to their launch position near Iran, close to Iran, to fire their $5 million JASSM, right, with one warhead.
Yes.
And then turn around, refuel, and go back. That's like a 2-3 hour round trip. The missiles that can hit their airport only take 10 minutes to get there. And I don't think we can stop them. I think we're out of effective interceptors.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, but between just running out and then them also having calculated how to put these like terminal jinx in, like you just make a couple small turns and the Patriots have no chance.
That's right.
It's like a batter he's perfect at hitting a fastball down the middle. As soon as he's a curveball, he can't calculate. So we always predicated everything on ballistic missiles are like
Not
a cannonball.
hypersonic. Right.
Yeah, but hypersonic or not, we were always calculating that they were a cannonball and that you could calculate it at the apogee and know just where to aim as it's coming in. But they've gone a generation ahead of our defense with maneuvering reentry warheads and even the hypersonic warhead that Ted Postal's been talking about, where there's a little booster rocket in the warhead so that these warheads are coming down at like 4 and 5 kilometers per second. And if you're a hunter and you think you've got a really, really super high velocity varmint rifle, this is like 3 or 4 times faster than that. This is super, super fast. And the Patriot only has 1 second to launch and hit it. And they're not. So we're in a position now where I think the other side knows we're bluffing. We can't do another big air attack. We can't. We'll be hit on the ground before most of the aircraft are off the ground.
So you are aligning what you're saying is aligning with that which retired Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski has said. Mario also is of the mind, basically, that the war, the kinetic phase is over on our end. Do you believe that there's nothing more Trump could try to do militarily? Because I think he's going to try to do something like dropping a B-61 on pickaxe. I think he's going to try something crazy after the midterms. Do you think that's completely off the table here? Matt, did we lose you? Well, can you hear me?
I think that we can't do the bidding because yes, I hear you.
Okay.
I think the Air Force generals have gotten through to them that the way that our aircraft are packed together on the ground and our inability to stop their ballistic missiles, that it will be very humiliating if we launch the big air armada when 1/3 are in the air. and the rest are maneuvering for takeoff and being fueled on the ground. And then those airfields are hit with these cluster munitions, the sub-munition, because it doesn't take much to not necessarily destroy, but to render combat ineffective an aircraft when a chunk of concrete goes flying through the wing, you can't take off. When you've got the runways are all spalled and cratered and pitted, our aircraft, we have to do FOD walk downs on our runways because a little pebble could be sucked into an engine.
That's right.
So every day the airmen are like out shoulder to shoulder walking down the run. Well, now crater that runway with yard wide concrete chunks flying everywhere. They're hitting aircraft and they're also rendering the airfield unusable. So you have 1/3 of the air fleet in the air. They may not be able to return to that base. The base may be, find somewhere else to land. So they'll be landing in Turkey and Cyprus if they can make it there, or to civilian airports in the region where they can't refuel and rearm. It'll be humiliating. It would be a total humiliation. So I think the Air Force generals have said, "Sir, we can't try that."
So you don't think the president
big test
is going to overrule them? Because I just think
it would be foolish. It would make us look terrible.
Okay.
He'll keep threatening it, but he won't do it because they've got us in a checkmate. It's the 21st versus the 20th century model. And the other thing that's a huge factor is the aircraft carrier deal, because
can't afford advanced fighter jets? Moscow now claims it has a deadly long-range alternative for the global arms market. Is Russia's new kamikaze drone set to bring 1,000-kilometer strike power within reach of more militaries? With a 50-kilogram warhead and 6-hour endurance, is Putin's newest deep strike weapon now going on sale? Could countries skip costly fighter jets and buy a cheaper route to striking deep inside enemy territory instead? Has Putin's new drone already drawn foreign interest, as Moscow pushes a major new weapon into the export market? Russia is now taking a 1,000-kilometer strike drone global as demand for deep attack weapons surges, aiming to expand Moscow's position in the unmanned arms market. Rosoboronexport has launched a global sales push for the new Garpia A1E strike drone, presenting it as a long-range weapon for foreign military customers. The one-way attack drone was developed by Russia's Almazanty Defense Corporation, a major Russian defense manufacturer best known for air defense systems. The system is built to attack predetermined fixed targets deep inside enemy territory, using target coordinates and mission data programmed before launch. Moscow claimed no other exported loitering munition matches its combination of long range and a warhead exceeding 50 kilograms. The Garpia A1E has an advertised strike range of at least 1,000 kilometers, allowing it to threaten targets far beyond a conventional battlefield. Its warhead weighs more than 50 kilograms, giving the drone a far greater destructive payload than most smaller tactical loitering munitions. The drone has a claimed maximum speed of at least 170 kilometers per hour, allowing it to cover long distances during deep strike missions. It has an advertised endurance of at least 6 hours, providing enough flight time for long-range routes and coordinated attack operations. The Garpia A1E can operate between 50 and 2,500 meters, allowing it to fly low or adjust altitude during a long mission. Its maximum takeoff weight is about 250 kilograms, making it significantly larger and heavier than drones built for short-range tactical operations. Moscow claims the drone can strike within 4 meters of its target coordinates, though its full guidance system has not been publicly disclosed. The drone uses a flying wing design with a petrol engine, combining a rear pusher propeller with the fuel capacity required for deep strikes. Garpia A1E flies automatically after receiving target coordinates and mission parameters, allowing it to attack distant fixed locations without continuous operator control. The drone could strike those targets without sending crewed aircraft into hostile airspace, reducing risks to pilots during heavily defended operations. However, its reliance on fixed coordinates could limit attacks against mobile targets, unless operators receive additional surveillance and updated targeting information. Launch sites can remain far behind friendly lines, allowing operators to strike distant targets while keeping crews and launch equipment away from the front. Indirect routes can exploit weaker air defense sectors, letting drones approach a target from unexpected directions and complicate defensive planning. Multiple drones can approach from different directions, forcing defenders to identify, track, and intercept threats arriving across several axes at once. Long endurance enables coordinated attack waves, allowing drone groups to time their arrival over a target area within a narrow window. Mass attacks could overwhelm radar networks, placing intense pressure on air defense crews trying to identify real threats among multiple incoming contacts. Defenders may expend costly surface-to-air missiles, firing expensive interceptors against drones that are likely cheaper to produce and deploy. Smaller militaries gain an affordable deep strike option, potentially acquiring long-range attack capability without purchasing advanced fighters or cruise missiles. Such a weapon could give states without advanced fighters a new long-range strike option, expanding the number of countries able to threaten distant fixed targets. Rosoboronexport said foreign partners have already shown interest in the Garpia A1E, after Moscow presented the new drone to several international customers. Almazanti has mastered serial production of the system, according to Rosoboronexport, claiming it can now manufacture the drone at scale. Moscow claimed output can support export orders without hurting Russian military supplies, even as its armed forces continue consuming large numbers of drones. However, sanctions could still complicate financing, component access, and long-term support, creating barriers for foreign buyers considering a Russian weapons contract. The global push suggests Moscow wants long-range attack drones central to its arms exports, using local production and technology transfer offers to attract customers. As Putin and Zelensky trade aerial blows, Russia is rushing new air defense systems to its forces, reinforcing defenses against drones, missiles, and other low-flying threats. Russia's military has received a new batch of Panzer air defense systems, according to Militani, adding fresh mobile and stationary systems to its expanding arsenal. The latest delivery included both mobile Panzer S and stationary Panzer SMD systems, giving Russian forces different options for battlefield and fixed-site protection. The new system successfully passed testing before military representatives accepted them, clearing the equipment for delivery and operational service with Russian forces. Moscow has not disclosed exactly how many new Panzer systems were included in the batch, leaving the scale of the latest air defense delivery unclear. The previous reported transfer of new Panzer systems to Russian forces came in March, reflecting continued efforts to reinforce short-range air defense capabilities. Panzer S combines missiles and rapid-fire cannons to engage short-range aerial threats, providing Russia with a layered response against drones, aircraft, and incoming munitions. Panzer S is armed with two twin-barrel 30mm 2A38M automatic cannons, providing rapid close-range fire against drones and other low-flying aerial targets. Its combined firing rate reaches 5,000 rounds per minute, allowing the system to create a dense wall of gunfire during fast-moving air defense engagements. The cannons have an effective range of up to 4 kilometers, giving Panzer S a final close-in layer of protection when targets break through missile coverage. The system carries 12 two-stage 576 solid-fuel missiles, combining its cannon armament with guided interceptors for longer-range aerial engagements. Standard Panzer missiles have a range between 1.2 and 20 kilometers, allowing the system to engage threats before they reach protected sites. Missile interception altitude reaches up to 15 kilometers, giving the system the ability to target aerial threats operating at low and medium altitudes. Unlike Panzer S, the stationary Panzer SMD does not carry 30mm automatic cannons, relying entirely on missile-based interception against incoming aerial threats. Panzer SMD can carry 12 standard anti-aircraft missiles, providing a conventional intercept option against aircraft, helicopters, and larger aerial threats. Standard missiles can intercept targets up to 20 kilometers away, extending the system's protective reach over important facilities and urban areas. Alternatively, Panzer SMD can carry up to 48 TKB-1055 anti-drone missiles, dramatically increasing its ready-to-fire capacity against mass drone attacks. TKB-1055 missiles have an interception range of up to 7 kilometers, giving the system a specialized layer for engaging smaller and closer unmanned threats. The anti-drone missiles can intercept targets up to 5 kilometers high, covering low-altitude airspace where small drones often attempt to evade detection. Standard and anti-drone missiles can be carried together, allowing operators to configure the system against a mixed threat of drones, missiles, and aircraft. In May, Russia installed Panzer SMD systems on the roofs of civilian buildings in Moscow, shifting air defense equipment above the capital skyline. The rooftop deployments aim to counter Ukraine's long-range unmanned aerial attacks, strengthening Moscow's defenses against drones approaching the city from multiple directions.
Upgrade your news experience with the all-new HT app. Download now.
A massive explosion rocked Tainan, Taiwan, sending a giant mushroom cloud into the sky in the early hours of August 22, 2026, sparking numerous questions on social media. The series of explosions reportedly occurred at an industrial waste site, on privately owned vacant land within a residential area, on Haidian Section 2 Road in Annan District. That the registered address of the factory turned out to be a beauty salon. A machine factory is suspected of having leased the land to store chemical magnesium and aluminum waste, including magnesium powder, aluminum materials, and waste oil from industrial machinery. Magnesium and aluminum are key raw materials for producing signal flares, signal rounds, incendiary bombs, missile components, and military equipment. Nevertheless, authorities attributed the cause to an industrial waste fire, amid suspicions of a fire at a U.S. ammunition depot. The magnesium-aluminum explosion in Tainan was not an industrial accident, but rather a resilience test in the U.S.-Israel supply chain war, reported WEF. If this is verified, the chemical waste was not ordinary industrial waste, it was military-grade raw material. When firefighters arrived, the water they sprayed triggered a violent chemical chain reaction. The force of the explosion shattered doors and windows within a 100-meter radius. This ultimately injured 15 people, including 3 firefighters and several local residents, and at least 68 homes and 22 vehicles were blown to pieces. The investigation is currently underway. The fire department successfully brought the fire under control, and the 3 firefighters injured in the explosion have been discharged from the hospital.
Go figure. Follow me.